Morning, welcome to Breakfast with Charlie State and Louise Minchin.
Our headlines today. The Prime Minister's cautious four-part plan to lift the coronavirus lockdown.
It will begin on March the 8th, when it's expected schools in England will be allowed to fully reopen.
But a trip to the hairdresser or a gym could still be many weeks off.
Good morning. Could pubs like this one be weeks away from welcoming customers to outdoor space? We've been speaking to non-essential retailers desperate for news. Some of them say every day that they can't open is a day closer to closing for good.
A memorial service is held in New Zealand to mark the 10th anniversary of the earthquake in Christchurch, which left 185 people dead.
Manchester City win their 18th consecutive game. They beat Arsenal and are now 10 points clear at the very top of the Premier League.
Also, we're meeting the man who spent lockdown making the impossible seem real.
Good morning. After a bright start in eastern areas, rain already in central and western parts of the country will push east but leave a fair bit of sunshine behind, and it's going to remain mild for much of this week. I'll have all the details later in the programme.
Good morning. It's Monday, the 22nd of February. Our top story today. The Prime Minister's four-point plan to ease lockdown measures in England will be unveiled today.
The first changes will take place on March the 8th, when it's expected schools in England will be able to reopen to all pupils. It's also thought that more outdoor socialising will be allowed next month. Our political correspondent Helen Catt has the latest.
It's been 7 weeks since everyone in England was told once again to stay at home. Later, Boris Johnson will set out how he plans to start opening things up again. But he's warned his roadmap will be cautious. That means it's likely it'll be some time yet before we're back in the shops, the hairdressers or the pub. It's understood the roadmap will be built around 4 phases, each separated by several weeks. Phase 1 starts on March the 8th. It's understood all schools will reopen to all pupils, despite teaching unions' concerns. There might be a few days of flexibility built in, but not the sort of phased return that Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland have chosen. Outdoor clubs and activities run by schools can restart too. Allowing friends and family to start meeting again is also expected in Phase 1. So from the 8th of March, care home residents will be allowed to see 1 regular visitor indoors. It's also expected that 2 people will be allowed to meet in a public outdoor space for a coffee, a chat or a picnic instead of just for exercise. Then later in the first phase, on March the 29th, it's understood that groups of 6 or 2 households will be able to meet up. It'll have to be outdoors, but it can be in a private garden. Sports like golf, tennis and grassroots football are expected to start again too. It's at this point that it's thought the instruction to stay at home will finally be lifted, but staying overnight elsewhere is still likely to be banned. Health leaders have backed caution.
What we don't want to see is that the health services come under the pressure that we have seen before. So actually what we're suggesting is that we take baby steps out of this to ensure that some of the systems and detail that we're giving people are correct. Remember, we came out of this once before and absolutely it didn't work very well for us. We actually had to go into lockdown very soon after.
But keeping restrictions causes economic and social damage. For the many businesses that have been forced to shut, it's understood the roadmap will set out a lot more detail on when and how they can open again. The Prime Minister will present his plans to MPs this afternoon and then again in a news conference at 7 o'clock this evening. Helen Catt, BBC News.
And we'll be talking about that, of course, throughout the morning. We'll be speaking to the Vaccines Minister Nadhim Zahawi at 7:30 here on Breakfast.
The phased reopening of schools begins in Scotland and Wales today. In Scotland, preschool children and the first 3 years of primary return this morning, while there's also a part-time return for older students for essential in-school practical work only. In Wales, children aged 3 to 7 will also go back today as the country's phased return gets underway.
A national memorial service has been held in New Zealand to mark 10 years since an earthquake in the city of Christchurch. 185 people lost their lives in the quake, which had a magnitude of 6.2. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern reminded those affected to take time for themselves as well as others.
Today I want to take the opportunity to say to all those who may still feel overwhelmed, who may still feel uncertain, sad, tired, anxious. You survived an event which by right should not occur in anyone's lifetime. I hope you find this space to be kind to yourself, as you've no doubt been to others who you knew were carrying the same burden.
Oh, well, let's speak right now to our correspondent Phil Mercer, who joins us. Very good morning to you from Sydney. So, Phil, a really sombre day. Just tell us a little bit more about those commemorations.
This is a day really of pain and optimism. New Zealand and many other countries remembering that awful tremor that struck at lunchtime on the 22nd of February in Christchurch in 2011. Among the dead, a 5-week-old baby girl and other very young children. There were British victims among the many foreign nationals. Many students died in the Canterbury television building where 2/3 of the victims died. That building was poorly built and no match for this powerful tremor. About half of all buildings in Christchurch were damaged, and 10 years on, political, social and community leaders came together at the Canterbury Memorial for those earthquake victims to really remember that terrible day and also to look forward. Christchurch is gradually being rebuilt into a greener and safer place to live and work. And the Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, taking time out to remember children. She said children who went through that awful experience a decade ago had deep unseen scars. And I think the same could be said for many, many adults as well. So New Zealand remembering one of the darkest days in its history and also looking forward to a time when Christchurch will finally be rebuilt and reborn.
Phil, thank you very much for bringing us up to date. Thank you.
The US plane maker Boeing has recommended that dozens of its 777 airliners be grounded over an engine fault which sparked an emergency landing in Colorado. It's after an engine on a United Airlines flight carrying 241 people burst into flames shortly after takeoff. Pictures showed debris from the plane scattered near houses and other buildings. There was no reports of any injuries.
The Radio 2 presenter Jo Whiley has described emotional scenes in an update on the health of her sister, who's ill in hospital with coronavirus. Frances, who has a rare genetic disorder, can be seen waving there in the hospital window in a video posted by the broadcaster yesterday evening. It comes after Jo made an impassioned plea for vulnerable people with learning disabilities like Frances to be given the COVID vaccine urgently.
A pensioner from Sussex, who is due to celebrate her 111th birthday next month, has been urging others to get their COVID jab. May Willis, who was born 2 years before the sink in the Titanic, has received her first dose of the vaccine and says she's looking forward to renewing old friendships once the lockdown is over. May says a long and happy life is the result of no smoking, no alcohol, plenty of chocolate.
111 is very old. I always think it's the time I went. But I wake up every morning and say, oh, you're still here. I've had my COVID jab and I think everyone should have it. It doesn't cost them anything and it helps to stop things spreading. Once lockdown is over and we can go back to the things we love doing, I shall love to look forward to go back and see my friends.
Well, let's hope that day comes very soon. 111 next month.
Oh, isn't
wow.
that wonderful?
See the headlines as they happen and watch BBC News live in the app and get the full story with bbc.co.uk/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.